I'm going to move on.
Let's do it.
To the HR news flash. So there's a new trend dubbed quiet cutting. I know, there's a quiet something, right? Quiet cutting is the latest outgrowth of the quiet quitting movement. So a quiet cut is essentially when an employee gets an email from a manager telling them their job has been reassigned, and they'll be doing this from now on, and basically take it or leave it. So the reassignments often land them in roles with titles that are less prestigious, come with lower pay, and are more demanding. This effectively allows companies to cut jobs and trim costs without actually laying off workers. Despite the downsides, quiet cutting might seem like it works. So Zetwerk found 40% of the people who are quietly cut eventually leave, and about 25% more plan to leave. Probably not a lot of surprise there. Companies including Adidas, Adobe, IBM, and Salesforce are among employers that have restructured their workforces in this way over the past year. What are your thoughts on that?
First, I get a shiver every time I hear the quiet thing. I still do to this day.
It's kind of like during the pandemic, like now more than ever. It's like, shut the up. Like, okay, you don't need to keep using this.
Well, here's what got me with quiet quitting, and we'll move on very quickly. With quiet quitting, I just kept saying, is anybody explaining to me why this is different than a disengaged employee previously before the pandemic when we talked about engaged, actively, disengaged, actively disengaged?
Absolutely.
And I was like, and not even from a cynical place. I'm like, okay, if we're going to have a new term, help me understand. And I talked to colleagues, I talked to other people, and I just kept coming back to like, they've just repackaged this. But the worst was, which I really loved, the Gallup State of the Workforce report that came out in 2023. They took their, what they show, they're the ones that for many years engaged, disengaged, actively disengaged. That's the three buckets for them. And under those titles said, engaged, quitting, quiet quitting. And they're like, we're reframing. I'm like, you've just proven this whole point. Why are you doing this? Like, if it's not new, whatever, quiet cutting. I hadn't heard the term until recently. What do I think? Look, so my background, if anybody's listening, I was 6 years as a lead people scientist at Culture Amp, and I spent a lot of time with organizations and helping them think about how are they collecting data, how are they listening to their employees at scale. So listening is, if you're going to dig in with me, listening is one thing, but listening at scale organization is another thing. How do we get relevant information that leaders can leverage and use to make decisions? And one of the questions on the survey is basically my role is, how do I feel about my role as compared to how it was described to me? When people score low on that, that's a high driver of disengagement and also a high driver of turnover. So when I hear that, before I get into any of the other stuff and what the news is saying, I just know that humans, one of the big drivers of engagement is this idea of agency, and that when we go into organizations, they're really not designed oftentimes for human. And one of them is how disempowering they can be with the hierarchies that we've set up. So when people lose agency, they kind of typically act out. If you tell me I'm going to do one thing, now I'm there. This is how I pay my bills, how I take care of my family. Now you tell me I'm doing something else. Naturally, even if I might like the new thing, I'm going to feel like that you didn't respect me in that. And what's our relationship here? Look, and on the flip side, as much as I love to see companies do things, I often say culture first, or thinking about it in how do you want to show up as an employer and for the long game? I get that people might leave and they're going to rehire into those. This could be a bigger kind of, I don't want to say Machiavellian, but strategy at the top of saying, look, we're realigning. We're not going to do layoffs, but we know people are going to leave and then we'll just replace them with the right roles. So I don't like that. I like to see companies behave, I believe human and productivity can be, that when people are happy and enjoy their workplace, the workplaces thrive. I also know that companies sometimes make decisions that are at much larger scale. And this may be one of them. We're going to do it. If you leave, fine, I'll replace you with the right person. And if you like the job, great. I don't like when organizations kind of take advantage of the contract,
Totally. And if there's a little bit of a, for lack of better words, a dehumanization where you're just kind of pushing people.
Come to me, say this role's changing. Do we need to come up with a 3-month strategy? Maybe we need to transition. Can you help us roll somebody in? This isn't working. How can we support you? Do you want to do this? Here are 5 new jobs coming. I mean, these things happen. And I always talk about that. We have to accept the game we're playing and also the human realness of it. Part of it's fake. It's a game. We didn't come up on this planet stuffing into buildings, doing this work that we can't touch, see, or feel. So there's a game being played, but also these are humans. These are real lives and relationships. So I try to see both. So in this case, it's accept the game that if a company doesn't make certain decisions, they cease to who cares about any of this stuff here? Because culture, it's not there anymore. It's gone. So the company needs to thrive and survive so there can be a culture. But how can you do it in a good way? And how can we do it this is what comes into listening. If I could get in front of those leaders and show them results and say, you made this decision and look at your scores, they plummeted by 15 points. Is this the decision you want to make, or do you want to take a different path? That's where I want to get to, is that we're having real conversations based on facts and helping leaders say, what's your long play here? If you can make a short-term decision that crushes your employee engagement, it's going to take you 18 to 24 months to get back. Is that the decision you want to make? And it might be like, we have to do a riff. Yes. Okay. You have to do it. How's the best way to do it as human focused and working with people? And honestly, I thought this before COVID, but now companies that do this better with distributed, way more flat organizations are going to thrive because they're listening and they're in sync with their people versus a group of people. All this talk about the leader decided everybody's come back to the office. Like, okay, let's see how that goes. Like what, based on what? On one person's desire to have command and control, or based on some sort of data saying, look, this is a hospital. Like we need it,
Right. And talk about stripping away autonomy. I mean, I think all of us know that person or have that partner. I mean, in my case, I have that partner, who's like, in fact, like now I'm hearing an organization that said unofficially, like, tell all of the managers that their team needs to come in 5 days a week, because we're expecting they're only going to come in 3 days a week. But if we tell them 5, then maybe it'll end up being 3. The whole thing is just a big mess. And I like to your point on like, the game is happening regardless, but we're human. I like to say business is business, but it's between people, not robots. And it sounds like everything that you're saying is aligned with that.
And it's always been my deeper belief that, like early on for me, at least, it became clear, and what's driven me in my journey into organizational psychology and the work I've done is I felt like early on in my own journey, I had experiences where I had these jobs where it was like, wow, people are happy and the business is really successful. And to me, I was like, isn't that perfect? Like, I love business and people, and I've also had jobs that have been awful and crushing and all the above. So I think I've just always been led with this idea of, and believe me, I've worked with all kinds of organizations. They're not all aligned with me philosophically, but like this belief that we can, if it's a cutthroat business leader that says, I want to have a great culture because I know it's going to deliver fine, whatever. Or if it's somebody that says, I just believe that I want to build a business and take care of people while I'm doing it. It's all great. It's just the idea that it's good business to take care of people, to do it right and not to shortcut, because there's always baggage and there's cultural debt that you're going to carry. And then my thing is, what I've learned along the way is how to help organizations measure and do it with intention and use real data that they don't believe exists, and it does. And it's powerful.